Hey there, as you may know, on the evening of October the 9th, Hurricane Milton slammed into the coast of Southwest Florida. It hit Siesta Key as a Category 3 hurricane. It's a little bit to the north of us. I'm here in the northwest section of Cape Coral, Florida. But up until the last moment, we were still in the cone of concern here, and it looked like it was going to be a pretty major storm. And I actually stayed here at my house throughout the entire days leading up to it, through the storm, and then in the aftermath of it. And I filmed the process, filmed the preparation, and as well as the experience of going through that. There's a lot of folks that watch this channel that are thinking of moving to Southwest Florida, so I think this is a useful video for you, both in just giving you some tips on how to prep for some of these storms, and then showing you what it's like to actually sit through one of these. You may think that it was foolish for me to stick around. I'm certainly not above criticism for sticking around for this storm, but nevertheless, hopefully you get a little bit out of this video. So let's get right into it. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a near 20-year resident of Southwest Florida. I've been a full-time real estate broker here for that entire amount of time. I do a video like this every single week where I just give you some really good, useful information. I'm certainly not doing it on hurricanes every single week, but hurricanes are a part of life here in Southwest Florida, and so I think this is a pretty important video. And if you're thinking of moving to the area, I hope you would reach out to me. My contact information is right there on the screen. It's also down in the description of this video, and you can call, text, or email me anytime. But with that being said, let's jump right into this. We'll start with a couple of days before the storm. All right, so the forecast calls for a major hurricane to hit the west coast of Florida in about 2 days. Right now it's a Category 5. They say it's going to come down to a Category 3, which would be a lot better for us down here. Right now it's supposed to hit Tampa Bay, but these things could turn at the last minute, and us down here in Southwest Florida might see a little more of a direct hit. So it's better to be safe than sorry and go ahead and put these hurricane shutters up now. And the hurricane shutters I have on my house was built in 2007, and these come with every new construction house. It's actually Florida code to have these hurricane shutters come with your new construction home now, if the home doesn't come with hurricane impact windows and doors. So there's definitely something to be said about having those hurricane impact windows and doors, because these things are a little bit of a pain to put up. It takes me about 3 hours to put ours up. I've got a 2,100 square foot home. So it's definitely more convenient to have that hurricane impact windows and doors, because then not only do you not have to put the shutters up, you can see out the windows during the storm. So, but in any case, these types of hurricane shutters, they just go right on to these bolts in the wall. They fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Each one of these panels, I've put a markered number on them just so I know which window goes on which, but they essentially just kind of fit in just like that. And they go over top of those bolts. And they slide right in. So, and then you tighten the bolts down, and then you're good to go. You can get on to the next one. But like I said, it takes a couple hours, 2-3 hours for me at least. And you can certainly pay people to do it. It usually costs about $300 depending on the size of your home. It's a little bit more if it's a 2-story house, but I'm still able to do them myself, so I always do them. And I would rather not do them. So hurricane impact windows and doors if you can. And here's why you need hurricane shutters. I got this one on upside down, but if you can read that, I circled this little dent right here, and that says Irma on it. It was from 2017 when Hurricane Irma came through. I think I had a big tree in front of this window, and one of the branches came down and banged that up pretty good. So definitely need to have those hurricane shutters up if one of these storms is on the way. In addition to getting the hurricane shutters up well in advance of the storm, we're also doing some common sense things like picking up loose items like this hose reel from around the outside of the house. If you can put those things in your garage or your house, that's great, but we put a lot of our outside furniture and things in this under truss section of our pool deck. And it's definitely not perfect, but it's more protected from the wind here, and they're not as likely to blow around. You know, another smart idea, if you've got a fence like my neighbor does, take some of the slats out of that fence to let the wind go through. Otherwise, a lot of your fence is going to end up on the other side of the neighborhood. All right, so we're about 24 hours out from the storm making landfall. I wanted to talk about one little thing. I've been out at my office just buttoning up a couple of things, putting some electronics on top of the desk in case we get water at our office. But I wanted to talk about buying things in advance of the storm. When we first heard this storm was heading our way, probably 4 days ago at this point, first thing my wife and I did was we went out and filled our gas tanks up and a few extra 5-gallon gas cans up with gasoline, because if you wait until 48 hours or 24 hours like now, you're not going to be able to find any gas stations that have gas. People tend to go and buy those out pretty quickly in advance of these storms coming. So it's best to go early. Same thing goes for groceries. If you can get out, you know, a few days in advance of the storm, those grocery aisles aren't going to be emptied like they are right now. It's also really good to go, if you can, in the first thing in the morning to a grocery store, and sometimes the shelves are a little more stocked then. So one other great thing that I learned the last go around is you take a lot of empty bottles, empty milk cartons, empty 2-liter bottles, things like that, and you fill it up with water. And this is my garage fridge and my garage freezer, and we've been just basically filling it up with ice for the last couple of days. This is actual cubed ice that we can use for the cooler and stuff like that, but we also have just bottles of water in here. And basically what that does is not only do you have a good supply of cold, fresh water for a while, it takes up space in your freezer, and that way if you lose power for a couple of days, you've got all those big chunks of ice basically in your freezer, keeping everything pretty cool. I mean, it essentially turns your freezer into one big giant cooler, and it's going to keep things frozen, or at least cold enough to where they're not going to go bad for quite a while. Actually, if you've got plenty of big ice blocks in there, it'll keep your freezer cold as long as you're not opening the door all the time for maybe a couple of 2-3 days. So good tip. So here's something that you may not think about, but again, it's from experience, because this was what happened to me during Hurricane Ian, is trim the tops of your tall trees. This big coconut tree behind me fell over during Hurricane Ian. I've still got the braces on it right now, just to keep it, you know, letting it grow back into the soil and firm up a little bit. But the reason that big tree fell over during Hurricane Ian was because the top of it had just probably 200 coconuts on it and all kinds of branches and stuff like that. You can see I've taken all the coconuts off for the most part and trimmed the tree up a little bit. You know, these trees are made, especially these coconut palms, are made to take those big winds. But if you leave a lot of those coconuts and additional branches on there, it just kind of acts as a sail and pulls it right over on its side. And it's pretty expensive to put one of these trees back up and brace it like that. So make sure you trim those trees up, and that'll maybe help prevent one of these big, tall, beautiful palm trees from falling over. So we have a whole house reverse osmosis system. We're on a well and septic system here, and so this is a water treatment system. And when we bought this system brand new, the folks at Water Medic, the company that sells this, made sure to tell me that, you know, if you ever have a hurricane, you want to make sure you strap this thing down. They've got some eye hooks here down in the concrete slab on either side of it, and they actually put one of these strap locks into the box. And I learned this lesson the hard way, because I didn't strap this down during Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago, and we lost this entire system. I didn't have water at my house for a number of weeks. So definitely not making that mistake twice, and you shouldn't either if you've got one of these systems. But get one of these strap locks and just crank it down really hard. And that way this box is going to stay closed, and hopefully your system isn't going to get mangled by the winds. Of course, during this entire time, we'd been monitoring our local news folks' really great 24-hour news coverage and tracking of this storm. And while it still looked like the storm was going to weaken and track to the north of us, the worst-case scenario storm surge predictions weren't looking great for our area of northwest Cape Coral. So we made the decision that the best thing to do was for my wife and kids to head inland to Babcock Ranch to stay with some family. That place really deserves its own video, because it's a cool town, and especially if you're really worried about these hurricanes, that place handles them really, really well for a number of reasons. We stayed out there for almost 2 weeks after Hurricane Ian, and they had almost no damage, and their power didn't even go out. If that sort of thing interests you, call me and I'll tell you all about it. All right, so the storm's supposed to hit tonight, and you know, I lost both of my screen doors on my pool and I last go around, and so I figured I would take them off this time just to maybe let that wind go through. I don't really know if that's going to help much or not, but it makes sense to me, so I'm taking them both off. Hopefully that lets a little air flow through the cage back there. I guess we'll see tomorrow morning.
You know, about this time, I noticed a couple interesting things happening with animals. First of all, I've never seen a gopher tortoise like this in my yard, but this guy was walking across my backyard and he ended up wedging himself under one of my areca palms, and he stayed there until well after the storm was over. There was also this big grouping of frigate birds over the house, and I can't recall ever seeing a group of them this large, and usually around here when we see them, they're more offshore. It's pretty interesting that these creatures obviously know something's coming.
You know, something else that I started doing the last couple of these storms, I forget who taught me this, but I like to park my truck parallel to my garage door like that. You can see that the front of my house faces north, and the bulk of the strongest winds, usually when these hurricanes are coming from the south, it's the southern winds, the winds blowing towards the north. And if you park the vehicle like this parallel to your garage door, obviously you're a little bit protected from those heavy southern winds and the debris that comes along with them. So just another little tip, and like I said, I forget who taught me that, but it makes sense to me. All right, so we're still about 12 or so hours out from officially making landfall, Hurricane Milton making landfall here in Southwest Florida, and we're starting to see the outer bands, the first outer bands of this hurricane, getting a lot of rain, some wind, and we're actually under a tornado warning right now for the next hour. The entire county, Lee County, is under a tornado warning. There's several that have been spun out on the ground there. That's what happens with these storms, you know, especially when you're on sort of the southeastern side of the storm. For whatever reason, those outer bands come through and they spin off tornadoes, and so those can be kind of unpredictable. So we're paying close attention to the alerts, and I'm hunkered down here by myself in this house in the Northwest Cape. So starting to get pretty real. Okay, we're about 9 hours away from Hurricane Milton making landfall, and for right now it looks like it's pushing a little bit to the north. You know, you really hate to be rooting for something like that, just because it means that the folks up there are just going to bear the brunt of this, but it's kind of hard not to for the folks here in Southwest Florida. We've just been through a lot here in the last couple of years, and we were just getting back on our feet. So to have another one come up like this is just disheartening, that's for sure. And hopefully we've got many, many years ahead of us where we don't have to deal with this again. But here we are. I had to walk across the street. We're still about 7 hours or so out from landfall, but I had to go over here and check these canals out and see what was going on with them. For all intents and purposes, it looks like the water level hasn't started really rising too much yet, but we're not into that wind zone where that really starts ramping up. I think that's going to happen later tonight, and maybe even overnight. We'll just have to see. But unfortunately, it looks like the peak storm surge is going to coincide with high tide over here. So I'll be keeping an eye on these canals throughout the night for sure.
So at this point, the wind was really starting to pick up. The heavy rain that we saw kind of gave way to some much heavier winds, and I started seeing some things blow around a bit. And we actually had one of the branches break off of our tababuya tree on the side of the house. I really love those trees, but that one's definitely grown way too close to the house for high winds like this.
So the 5 p.m. update just came in from the National Weather Service, and looks like it's pushing further towards Tampa. I think this is the last update that we're going to get from them prior to landfall, and it's either going to make landfall in somewhere around Tampa Bay, maybe on the south side of Tampa Bay, maybe Bradenton or something like that. So it looks like it's moving farther away from us. Obviously, that's not great news for those folks up there, which is sad. But one spot of good news is it's slowing down. Now it's a Category 3. I think the latest I saw, winds were maybe 130, maybe a little bit less than 130 miles an hour, which is vastly different from where it was. You know, when we started out looking at this storm back when it was out further in the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 5, there were wind gusts of 225 miles an hour. The storm was made it to one of the top 5 strongest storms in history in the Atlantic Basin. So it's good to see that it's weakening before landfall, but we're going to be watching that storm surge quite a lot, because since we are on the southern side of the storm, that's the side that gets the most storm surge when those winds kind of push all that water onshore. So we're going to be paying attention to those canals, and hopefully all the folks on the island and around
here in the Cape on the canals, don't see too bad of a storm surge, but guess we'll see.
Something I'm never going to be able to convey is just the noise of one of these storms. It sounds, there's whistling, and it sounds like a freight train going off. I mean, it's absolutely humbling how powerful and how noisy one of these storms are. It's incredible. I keep going across the street to check on the canals, and so far water's not up over top of the seawall yet. I'm not sure when we're supposed to get peak surge, but I don't think it's yet. So it's starting to get dark. It's just a few minutes before 7 o'clock, and wind's been crazy.
Well, it's 8 o'clock at night, so we're well into this storm, and I can't believe I haven't lost power yet. The wind's been howling, and the lights flickered a couple of times. Power went out and came back on once, but other than that, haven't experienced any disruptions in power or internet for that matter. So, you know, pretty fortunate, because I figured we'd be in the dark by now. It's all dark outside, so just need to stay up and watch that storm surge. All right, so it's about 8:45 here on Wednesday evening. It looks like, for all intents and purposes, landfall for this storm is going to be right at 9, so here in about 15-20 minutes. And it took a big hard right turn. It was heading towards Tampa Bay, took a big right turn, and now it looks like it's going to go directly over Sarasota, so I hope those folks are battened down. Luckily, it's just a Category 3 storm now. Not that that's you know, anything little. That's certainly a major hurricane, but the way it was looking, it could be a lot worse. I think the gusts are like 120 mile an hour, but we're still getting 70 mile an hour winds here. I'm not sure if you can hear that or not, but it's 70 mile an hour winds are no joke. I can't believe I haven't lost any trees yet. So far, we haven't had any damage. I continue to go across the street to look at how the storm surge is doing, and so far so good. I was just over there, and still about a foot underneath the seawall. Got a text from my mom, who's down in, my parents are down in Iona, in Fort Myers. They're on the water, and it looks like the water's getting up a little bit over top of their dock, so it's not anything unsafe at this point, but you know, I'm sure it will probably get a little bit worse, so we'll just have to keep an eye on things. For right now, the Northwest Cape's doing pretty good. All right, so Hurricane Milton ended up making landfall on Siesta Key, so a little bit south of Tampa Bay, and hopefully everybody's going to be all right up there. I'm sure they evacuated Siesta Key just like they evacuated our barrier islands, but it ended up making landfall as a Category 3, 120 mile an hour storm, so significantly less powerful than it was, but that's still a major hurricane, and I'm sure that area is gonna see some damage. So luckily for Tampa, you know, it came on shore south of them, so it's not going to get much of, Tampa's not going to get much of a storm surge, so it's nice that at least that big population center is not going to see the big storm surge, but that does mean that we are under a storm surge threat being on the southern end of this. So for all intents and purposes right now, everything's looking good, but I'm probably going to stay up all night watching the, yep, there went the power again. The power's been flickering in and out. I'm sure I'm on borrowed time. I can't believe it's lasted this long, but I'm just waiting for it to go out finally. Yeah, I'll be staying up all night checking on that storm surge. At this point, the wind was coming from the west, which is why we were concerned with that storm surge. That west wind was just pushing water from the Gulf into our canal systems, and just listen to how heavy that wind was getting.
Alright, so I just checked the storm surge, and the water's definitely up. It's up about to the cap of the seawall. So I'm going to be checking it probably more often now
that's starting to come up pretty good. I know Punta Gorda's getting some inundation, so it would make sense that we should get some too. Still got power. Can't believe I got power right now, but it's been going in and out. Here's how I knew we were on borrowed time before the power went out. This is the transformer going into my house. Every single one of these on the street was sparking like this in the wind. It was such a crazy thing, and I definitely didn't walk underneath these lines again for the rest of the night. Well, shoot. For a minute there, I was getting my hopes up that we might actually make it all the way through the night without losing power, but looks like we just made it to just before 10 o'clock at night. So, and the power finally went out and didn't come back on. So, looks like we're going to be in the dark for the rest of the night. Still probably going to just stay up and keep track of that water across the street. For all intents and purposes, the storm surge hasn't manifested in a big way yet, at least not in this location. I know Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte, they're dealing with it, but guess we'll just have to see. So it's about midnight now. Obviously, I still don't have power, and it's tough to see outside. I haven't been going outside. The wind's just too much right now. Been howling the last couple of hours, and so I'm really not sure what the storm surge is doing. From what I can see by looking out in front, it looks like the water's filled up in the ditch, and I think it's in the street now. So, you know, we really need this wind to die down and start changing directions, you know, as soon as possible. I think tide starts coming back in at like 2:30, which would make a bad situation even worse. So we really would like to see some of those winds die down and at least change direction before 2:30 in order to not exacerbate the already tough problem of the storm surge. So I recall it being somewhat similar like this during Hurricane Ian. A lot of that happened at night. I don't think we had a surge quite as bad here in the Northwest Cape for Ian as we are having right now. So we'll just have to see. You know, like I said, I'm staying up all night. There's no way I could go to sleep right now. It's just too nerve-wracking. But you just hope that you prepared as best you can, and you wait to see. So I guess we'll see. Well, this has been no fun. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and my home essentially sits on an island. We've got water all in the vacant lots next door and in the streets all the way around the house. And the wind's laid down quite a bit, so hopefully we've seen the crest and it's on its way back out. But an incoming hill tide starts right about now and is going to add about 8 more inches. But that shouldn't do too much. We can stand to get another 8 inches if we need to, but I think some of it's going out, so it's not going to really matter anyway. This one was a close one, but it looks like we dodged a bullet. So this was basically the end of my night. Once the wind slowed down, the water started receding. You know, this was definitely the highest storm surge I've ever experienced in the Northwest Cape, but in spite of how nerve-wracking it was to see water coming up the driveway like this, the water did stay pretty far away from my actual house, and that was even more evident in the light of the next day.
Well, the storm surge finally went back down, and I was able to lay down and get a couple hours sleep. And then I woke up this morning to the unfortunately familiar sounds of a neighborhood full of generators going off. And I was really hoping not to hear that sound again for a long time after Hurricane Ian. I heard it for about 2 weeks a couple of years ago. But you know what? We really just dodged a bullet here. Not much damage at all, at least at my house. I know I've got some friends that have had some boat damage and dock damage and things like that from the rising water. And I don't want to diminish that damage at all, but at least in my neighborhood, it looks like damage is very minimal. You know, cosmetic things, mostly just, you know, trees broken up and debris and things like that. There's a lot of porta potties rolling down the street. But I really think that we dodged a bullet here, and I'm really just thankful to God, because especially when one hits at night like that and you just don't know, it's just a lot of anxiety when it's dark outside and you really can't tell how high the actual water is and all that stuff. And you're hearing that wind howling and not sure what kind of damage it's doing outside. But just very grateful that that this storm wasn't as bad as it probably could have been. And feel terrible for the folks up a little bit north of us. I haven't been able to see the news or anything like that. So hopefully, you know, they were somewhat spared as well. I'm sure they got it worse than we did, but these storms are they're not fun.
All told, my losses were virtually nothing, just a few screens and some food that we had to throw out because the power was out for a while. And really, driving around the city the next day, I didn't see much damage at all. Certainly, it was night and day difference versus the day after Hurricane Ian. A lot of the city still had power, and as soon as the wind slowed down, there was an army of linemen replacing transformers and blown over poles and things like that. I think they were out before dawn getting power restored. It's really an amazing level of coordination. Most of the city, including my area of the Northwest, had power back in less than 2 days. You know, no one wants to experience a hurricane, but if you have to go through one, you definitely would prefer the disruption to be minimal like this one was. That doesn't minimize what the folks on the islands or to the areas to the north of us that got more of a direct hit experienced, but at least for Cape Coral, this was overall pretty minor.
You know, I wanted to end this video with just a little bit of perspective for the folks that maybe think that we're having, you know, more hurricanes now than years past. I'm certainly not here to tell you that if you move to Florida or Southwest Florida where we're at, that you're never going to experience a hurricane. And certainly we've had a pretty active couple of years here. And actually, I think this year, 2024, we've had 3 hurricanes hit the state of Florida, which ties us with 5 other years for the most in any given year, going back about 175 or so years. But I want to show you this chart. This is from the National Hurricane Center, and this is for hurricanes that made landfall anywhere in the United States, not just Florida. I couldn't find a really good chart with just Florida. So these are hurricanes that hit everywhere from Texas, Louisiana, all the way up to New York in some cases. And if you look at this, we're certainly off to probably an above average decade right now. This one only goes to 2023, so we haven't included these 3 storms that hit Florida here in 2024 so far. But if you look at the previous 4 out of 5 decades, we actually had fewer major hurricanes during those decades than the 172-year average, which is how far back this chart goes. If you look all the way back into the 1940s, I mean, my gosh, they had 10 major hurricanes make landfall in the United States in the 1940s. I mean, can you believe going through that in the midst of World War II? It's absolutely incredible. But my point in saying all of this is I think these things kind of come and go, and we have cycles of high activity with hurricanes and we have cycles of low activity. We're going through a high right now, there's no question of that. But hopefully on the back of this high period of activity, we're going to have maybe a decade or 2 or 3 or 4, hopefully, where the hurricane activity kind of slows down and we don't see as many of these major storms. And you know, I think that's just important perspective to keep. But in any case, I hope you got a little bit out of this video. At the very least, maybe you got a few tips on how to prepare for one of these things when we see one of these storms out in the Gulf coming our way. And maybe you got to experience a little bit of what it's like to go through one of these storms. And I certainly don't recommend that you do that. I'm certainly not above criticism for sticking around for this storm, but luckily it ended up being not too bad for us here in Cape Coral. But thank you so much for watching. Do me a favor and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you can stick around for these videos every single week. I would love to have you around for them. And if you do have a real estate need, buying or selling a property here anywhere in Southwest Florida, not just here in Cape Coral, I hope you'll reach out to me. Again, my contact information is right there on the screen, but it's also down in the description of this video. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next video here in just a few days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.